Warpugs. Of all the laws of God and man, there is one that has broken all of them, and that's Fulgrim. Because, wow, the list of things that is wrong with this particular Primarch. Sun, stars, and moon, my guys. Sun, stars, and moon. If you've never learned about the Primarchs, Fulgrim, his fall to chaos is one that is contentious for a number of reasons to some people. It really, really, really does get the people sometimes talking about how Fulgrim fell. But at the same time, Fulgrim is the most outrageously ridiculous Primarch, period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this, okay? He did everything. He did everything. He was the first Primarch to kill another Primarch during the heresy. And to say his legion fell apart fast is an understatement. Warpugs, this is PancreasNoWork. All of his links are going to be in the description down below. Let's just collectively shake our heads at the Phoenician and the Emperor's children.
Ah, the traitor Primarchs.
Yes.
They're such interesting and nuanced characters. None of them have motivations that can be described as stupid and childish, and certainly none of them are characters with a personality that would make even the most patient of people want to bash their head through a brick wall. Hey there, Perturabo, how are you doing? Or Horus, who ultimately fell to chaos because someone stabbed him with a knife. Thank you, GW. Very interesting motivation, that one. But there are a few standouts who are interesting. Magnus was a cool dude before the heresy, and his downfall came about because of tremendous pride, even if the specifics of the writing revealed that half his motivations don't make much sense. Kinda hard to take him seriously about wanting to avenge Prospero in the 40th millennium when it only fell because he turned off all the defenses and ignored all of Leman Russ's text messages.
Right.
But out of all the traitor Primarchs and the few among them whose backstories I actually like, the one I appreciate most is Fulgrim. Fulgrim the Phoenician, Primarch of the Emperor's children. Once he was a noble warrior with a bit of pride in him, and now he's a weird snake creature who cares for nothing more than to chase the next high in life. And how topical, since he got a Horus Heresy demon model not too long ago.
He's literally a hentai monster now.
Let's look at his life story, and see how one of the Emperor's most noble sons turned into a big horny snake for all eternity. But hold the phone, ladies and gentlemen, because I've got a very fitting offer for you.
Oh, God.
This video is all about Fulgrim, 40k's champion of the Chaos God of Pleasure. It's a grim world in the far future, after all. Never hurts to want to feel good when you can. Which is why I'm happy to bring you the sponsor of today's video, Adam and Eve.
How did you land this sponsorship for this video?
About it. What kind, you may ask? The answer is yes. Toys for men, toys for women. If you can think of it, they've got it. I took a look at the catalog and oh my goodness, I didn't even know there were that many kinds of adult toys you could buy. Take a look for yourself and be blown.
Of course. Of course. Because why not?
Away by the sheer amount of variety on hand. And while there's nothing wrong with buying something to spice your life up a bit, you may still be a bit nervous about people seeing it. That's understandable. Well, lucky for you, the shipping is completely discreet. So have no fear of your neighbors learning exactly what makes you go bump in the night, my good viewer. Adam and Eve has you covered. I've had to censor my entire screen because YouTube doesn't like their catalog very much, but rest assured that you will. They've got you covered in more ways than just that, though. You've got 24/7
Just the look on that guy's face. I can only imagine the customer service calls they get.
Customer service and a 90-day no-hassle return policy to work with, too. That's some customer-friendly stuff right there. And hey, 20% of the profits Adam and Eve makes goes to fighting the spread of AIDS, so while you're feeling good, you can feel good knowing you've made a difference.
Yay.
And since today's video was sponsored by adamandeve.com, they've given me a code to make it all the easier to go screw yourself. Use code PANCREAS, all caps, for 50% off one item, plus free shipping in the US and Canada. Some exclusions apply. So get shopping with Adam and Eve today, because you shouldn't feel bad about feeling good. Now then.
Sadly enough, I'm putting that in the description down below. Why am I supporting heresy?
Fulgrim time. Apologies if I'm a bit nasalier than usual in this video, I'm coming back down from COVID. Fulgrim, as all the Primarchs were, was created by the Emperor on Terra to lead his army after all his perpetual friends left him for being a complete lunatic. The Chaos Gods and/or his mom threw him into the warp, and he landed on the planet of Chemos. Funnily enough, he wasn't even supposed to be on that planet.
True.
He was supposed to land on Chagoris, and Jagged Icon was supposed to land on Chemos.
The
Elder God Kegarak,
I really don't know how that would have worked out.
for whatever reason, pulled a little switcheroo on them all and switched where these two Primarchs landed. Presumably this was to keep Jagged Eye from falling to one Chaos God or the other, in which case, good job, Kegarak.
Good job,
Unfortunately
yeah.
for Fulgrim, this meant he had to grow up on Chemos, which was a total shithole. Being a planet relying on trade to survive, when the Age of Strife happened, it was up the creek without a paddle in sight. There was no time for relaxation, no time to rest, no time for anything but work, really. I don't even think there was much time for war. War would have meant pulling people away from factories they needed to survive, and that just wasn't happening. Supplies were stretched so thin on Chemos with its resources that when Fulgrim was found, they debated killing him, because apparently that was just standard practice with any orphans you found on the planet.
Hooray!
But whether they sensed something special in Fulgrim because of who he was, or he was just so damned cute they couldn't bring themselves to do it, he was instead adopted by a pair of Chemosians. Is that what you call them? And raised in the squalid conditions of the planet. His parents also died when he was young, which is morbid, but at the very least, Fulgrim remembered them fondly and thought they did the best they could given the circumstances. Like the rest of the Primarchs, he had stamina, strength, and stature beyond any normal human being. Unlike the rest of the Primarchs, there was no great leadership role for him to take that would change his planet forever. He was just another laborer. He didn't join a revolution or found a new religious movement, he was just Fulgrim. Of course, being a Primarch, he had special I'm better than you powers, so he made factories more efficient, found new technologies, and granted people something they had lost for generations.
Imagine this image any example of literally any Mary Sue that springs to mind. For that fits nearly all the Primarchs' backstories. For me, I imagine almost any isekai protagonist because that genre is garbage to the core, except for Saga Tanya the Evil. Shit's cash. I can agree with him.
The coveted 15-minute break at the Amazon warehouse. His efforts lifted the spirits of the people of Chemos, and they worked alongside him to give themselves a chance at a better life. And you know what? I think even more than Gilman, this is my favorite Primarch backstory. There's no epic battles or tragedy, no archaeotech turning a noble healer into a monster, there was no great monster to fight. Through hard work and perseverance, he just made life better for everyone.
There you go.
It's probably the most down-to-earth backstory out of all of the Primarchs, and I think it's fantastic for that reason alone. He also was apparently married multiple times, but kept outliving his wives to the point he just stopped caring about them, which is depressing as hell. He did eventually become the planetary leader, but what I said earlier still holds true. He wasn't put in charge because he single-handedly ended a centuries-long war or anything so generic as that. Everyone just liked the guy because he was charismatic as all hell and did good work, so they put him in charge. Then the Emperor shows up as he does, and Fulgrim took one look at him and dropped to a knee and pledged his services to his newfound father. This would also presumably be the last time Fulgrim was on his knees without someone's junk going into his mouth. He and
Wow, okay. Yeah, we're hitting that stride aura.
Father Dearest took a trip back to Terra where he met his legion, or what was left of it at any rate. Turns out his kids had a bit of an oopsie-doopsie with their gene seed supplies, and combined with the fact that it eventually gave them all super cancer meant that Fulgrim only had 200 legionnaires left to command. Not that he seemed to care much though, because at this point he's still a real grade A fella. He gave a speech about how proud he was of them that was so goddamn heartwarming that the Emperor named Fulgrim's sons the Emperor's children on the spot, and gave them the use of the Imperial Aquila for their heraldry. It was heartwarming for the Legion and Fulgrim at any rate. Big E was probably just glad someone was stroking his ego a bit. Now in command of his Legion, Fulgrim determined that they would live up to the name of Emperor's children and the expectations it placed on them. They would not just be good Space Marines, they would be the best Space Marines. They would not just be warriors and artists, they would be the best warriors and artists. Fulgrim would not just be hot as hell, he would be anime self-insert levels of attractive. His attitude not only led his Legion to greater and greater heights, but led to him becoming friends with Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim declared he would make the best weapon ever. Ferrus Manus said the dumb twink in front of him couldn't possibly do something like that, and then they both took their shirts off. After that, they worked on the respective armaments for 3 months straight. When they finished, they gifted each other the weapons that they had made, but only after saying that the other's was the best weapon, and I would assume at this point they put their shirts back on too. With this Top Gun level of accidental homoeroticism finally wrapped up, Ferrus and Fulgrim would be friends for the rest of the Great Crusade, and Fulgrim went about conquering the stars with a sword that Gorgon made for him. Oh yeah.
I was about to mention it, but he's about to say it.
He was also the one who nicknamed Ferris the Gorgon. This is one of those GW things like Monkai, where they go, no, the Eldar aren't actually calling humans monkeys. Just like Fulgrim wasn't actually comparing Ferris to Medusa. I really wish they'd stop doing that, because all it really does is make people act pretentious and go, well, actually, in online arguments over this shit. Anyway, Great Crusade. No more complaining about GW's horrible writing practices for at least a few minutes. Okay. Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children were sure enough known for excelling at whatever they put their minds to. If it was time for a full frontal assault, the Emperor's Children were rushing in, chainswords swinging. If it was time for a slow and protracted siege, they were going to build a fortress that would make Rogel Dorn grunt in approval, the highest form of emotion he normally displayed.
True.
They earned more honors and whatnot per unit than any other legion, which is quite the feat. So while the Ultramarines, for instance, had more honors overall, the average Emperor's Children Marine had more commendations than the average Ultramarine. Fulgrim, as I said, demanded his legion study the artistic fields, because to his eyes, being great warriors wasn't enough. He wanted his soldiers to be icons of what humanity could become, not just mindless murder machines. In this, he was actually one of the Primarchs with pretty noble ideals behind him.
Yep.
While part of it was in pursuit of perfection, which I'll touch upon shortly, it was also because he knew what even the lowest of people could achieve if given the chance. He
had an addiction to perfection that went way beyond anything that could be considered normal.
Determined to make Space Marines paragons of humanity, a beacon to all. Of course, this all meant that they weren't without a growing ego, to the point that one of the only things we know for certain about the missing Primarchs is that the second one called Fulgrim arrogant for claiming he could take a world down with only 8 Marines by his side. Also, Fabius Bile was doing his best to put Frankenstein to shame and experimenting on every legionnaire who was too slow to say no to the guy. These things would probably be worrying for anyone else had the Emperor not firmly decided he could not care less about anything his kids were doing. As long as the number of planets in his Stellaris Empire kept going up, he didn't care, which, to be fair, is also the only thing I give a damn about.
Now, you're in the shot. Are you happy? Are you happy? Okay. Now, there you go. You can go ahead. You can go back to acting like I don't exist. There you go.
In that game. As a flaw, the perfectionism of him and his legion cannot be understated, because it is the driving force behind his fall beyond even the Laer blade, I'd argue.
Yeah.
He wanted to create something perfect, the greatest piece of art that would forever stand the test of time. He viewed humanity as the perfect species, and the Emperor as the perfect human all should aspire to. It drove every aspect of his personality and would only become more dominant as the Great Crusade went on, which set the stage for the Chaos God he would ultimately fall to. There was also a growing level of dislike Fulgrim had for mortals. Remember how I said he stopped caring about his wives? Well, to stop caring, you have to have cared at one point. And care he did. He loved them at first. But him being a Primarch, he outlived them all. He outlived his family, his mortal friends from Chemos, and really anyone who wasn't either a Space Marine or one of his Primarch brothers. None of them were suddenly killed in a tragic moment or turned traitor and he was forced to contend with that sort of emotional baggage. They just died like all normal people do, which for an immortal demigod is a whole different kind of baggage. That's one of the reasons I like him so much. His Primarch backstory touches upon the fact that they live forever and the people they grow up with don't, even if only briefly. His sadness turned to pity, and eventually that led him to becoming detached from those under him. Some of that was also likely the general dislike many of the Primarchs had for being governed by mortals, but it's good stuff regardless of that. His perfectionism likely had a hand in this as well. Space Marines on a technical level are generally better than mortals, or at the very least can be more precise in things like combat or sculpting due to their superior senses and other augmentations. I'm not going to sit here with a straight face and tell you that a Space Marine can magically make a piece of art with more feeling. They can probably hold a paintbrush with better stability than any of us can. So to some extent, you can probably see where Fulgrim's coming from as he became detached from mortals. Not necessarily agree with, I mean, I don't think Fulgrim's in the right here, but I get it. Others certainly took note of the problems of him and his legion, most notably Mortarion and Jagged Icon. Mortarion just hated the guy because of how vain he was, which may in part be because Mortarion looks and smells like shit at all hours of the day. The Khan had similar reasons.
Mortarion hated everybody for more or less stupid reasons
For disliking him, but him being Jagged Eye, the one and only Khan, his reasons were a bit more well thought out. He compared him to Sanguinius, saying that while both of them were the finest pieces of eye candy you'll ever see, Fulgrim's was a bit more forced. Not necessarily that Fulgrim was a tryhard, just that Fulgrim was putting the work on to achieve a goal that probably wasn't worth the effort, while Sanguinius was just naturally that regal and elegant.
There you
Probably
go.
didn't help his opinion that Jagged Eye figured Fulgrim would rather die before he cast off his bling, while Sanguinius doesn't give a damn about looking good, he just happens to look really good. Despite all of this, Fulgrim and his legion were still performing well, so nothing was done about the issues steadily growing in the Emperor's children. If they didn't do anything about Angron jamming nails in his kids' brains, having a bit of an ego wasn't even a blip on the radar for the Imperium as a whole. Eventually, Fulgrim came to the planet of Laerin, home to the species known as the Laer. Interestingly, the Imperium was actually trying to make the Laer a protectorate after it was brought to heel, showing that sometimes Xenos were actually reasoned with at this point. Of course, I'm also 100...
Only really because the concept of trying to fight them at that point would have taken a long time. They were going to wind up sending Perturaba to do it.
10% certain that protectorate meant a species-wide slave farm, but this is still the Imperium we're talking about. They're not going to be good guys about the thing, just a slight bit less of total dickheads. Fulgrim, however, said that in refusing to completely submit in the first place, they deserved total extinction, and just like that, we're right back to good old-fashioned Imperial diplomacy.
There we go.
Also, because he thought humanity was the perfect species to rule the galaxy, that means everyone else wasn't perfect, and therefore not worth letting live. I also love how this is one of the only cases where the Imperium was probably justified in wiping a species off the map, because the Laer were fully devoted to Slaanesh by this point. When your entire species devotes itself to Satan, I don't feel bad for saying you should be wiped out. His reasoning for wanting to kill them was typical Imperial garbage, but he accidentally made the right call. What was not the right call was picking up the Laer blade. At the center of Laer civilization was a grand temple to Slaanesh which the Laer centered themselves around, and inside that was a very nice looking silver sword. Claiming it as a war trophy, Fulgrim began to wield it more than his own sword that Ferris made for him. Now, to try and give him the benefit of the doubt, the Emperor had steadfastly refused to teach any of his subjects about chaos on the horribly flawed idea that it was the best way to keep them safe from it. He wouldn't have known that just holding something chaos corrupted is a fast track directly to damnation. But on the other hand, this thing could not have been any more obviously evil. It whispered to him in his mind to do horrible things, and Fulgrim in his boundless wisdom just thought that, ah yes, it's just my subconscious speaking to me. Damn, my inner monologue is dark. Bruh. Yeah, he resisted initially, but like, come on, dude. Your subconscious was mysteriously silent your whole life, and suddenly you pick up a sword, and from that moment on, it tells you to start doing math. Why? How do you justify that as your subconscious? Anytime anyone ever tells you with a straight face that Space Marines and Primarchs are objectively more intelligent or better than normal human beings, just point to this. They clearly aren't, because holy shit, any normal person who picked that up would assume they've been forced into a horror movie and run like hell. But whatever, Fulgrim's got a shiny new sword now that probably has the Snickers cock veins running down it if you look close enough. Before things all go pear-shaped, two more things I feel of note
Oh God, why'd you have to say it like that?
happened with Fulgrim. One is that the Iron Hands and Emperor's children were facing off against a human civilization known as the Diasporax. They were refusing to submit to Imperial rule, so naturally it was time for all dictatorships to do what they do best and blow up the people with ideas they don't like.
There you go.
They had alien allies too, which the Imperium really doesn't like. The Diasporax were experts at space combat, and gave the Astartes legions a real run for their money on account of it not actually mattering if a space marine or a normal dude is the one firing a starship's main guns. Fulgrim, in a fit of baby rage, boarded one of their ships to take it out, but couldn't even make it to the bridge before it got blown up by another cruiser. This whole affair led him to be rather upset with Ferris, because in his mind, Ferris was only helping because he was taking pity on his brother for not being good enough to get the job done himself. Of course, from what little personality the guy has, we know that Ferris has even less in the way of ulterior motives than Rogel Dorn and just wanted to help his best friend out, but Fulgrim's a prideful bastard and didn't quite see it that way. The other thing that happened of note is that he technically found the Interrex. There was this planet that had a bunch of warning signs all around it, telling anyone who wandered by to get the hell away from it. All real unsubtle and obvious. Fulgrim decided clearly those warnings were for someone else and landed on the planet anyway. And then the Mega-Arachnids made their grand reappearance in the lore by slaughtering the Emperor's children en masse.
Yay!
The Interrex showed up confused as to why anyone would set foot on that planet, let alone try and conquer it, and that leads to the whole thing with Horus getting stabbed with the poop knife and kickstarting his fall to chaos. Arguably, this means that the Horus Heresy...
Actually, that was Eidolon. He was a captain of the Emperor's children who came across where the Blood Angels had landed on the planet Murder, which became called Murder because of the Mega-Arachnids. And the Blood Angels sent a distress call. The Eidolon of the Emperor's children responded, deployed his entire Marine contingent to the surface, and promptly got trapped there.
heresy would never have happened, or at least wouldn't have happened till later if Fulgrim didn't set foot on that death world. The name of which, by the way, was Murder. Fulgrim looked at a planet called Murder and thought to himself that this was still a planet worth adding to the Imperium. Who does that? Khorne, I guess, but Khorne's not involved yet, and either way, that's not the Chaos God Fulgrim falls to. Anyways, Interact stuff happens, Horus is corrupted now, the first domino has fallen, and the others aren't far behind. Eldred makes one of his many cameos in the heresy and tries to warn Fulgrim of Horus's fall to chaos,
This is the dumbest thing I can possibly think of that Eldred did. It is the dumbest thing. It is the core reason why I can't stand Eldred, because he managed to pull this off.
being aware of the fact that he's already kind of falling to Slaanesh. In his defense, Slaanesh was directly interfering with his farseeing. All he really had to go on was picking a Primarch at random and hoping they were cool with him. Fulgrim, on account of being Stormcloak levels of racist, goes nuh-uh, and combined with the fact that the Laer blade is getting an increasingly firm grip on both his soul and his balls, the Eldar forces and the Emperor's children go to war. And I shouldn't have to tell you that Fulgrim wins the battle.
Yeah.
It's the Horus Heresy. This is something that by all rights probably should have taken Fulgrim out of the setting, but that can't happen by canon, so he has to win. Him and his legion kill a Wraith Lord that was one of the Eldar's greatest heroes at the time, and also an Avatar of Cain. I'm sure you're surprised to hear about an Avatar of Cain getting waffle stomped. It never happens.
He choked it to death with his bare hands. Fulgrim choked an Avatar of Cain to death. My God.
The Eldar did manage to kill all of Fulgrim's elite guards in return, but those were Space Marines in Legion times. Not exactly hard to find replacements. Fulgrim soon after meets with Horus and casually brings with the whole affair just to see if Eldrad was lying or not, and Horus convinces him that actually the Emperor is holding humanity back from the perfection Fulgrim so desires. He tells him that only the Chaos Gods can provide it, and that mankind will never be completely perfect without them. Doing a complete 180 on his viewing of things, Fulgrim joins his brother's rebellion and now hates the Emperor.
Yay.
This is where my mind kinda wars with itself, because the idea of Horus turning Fulgrim to his side using the very ideals he held dear is quite compelling stuff. But that little brainworm in the back of my mind always reminds me that it only happened because Fulgrim picked up the galaxy's most evil sword and his mental faculties just turned off whenever he questioned why it was telling him to try heroin in human flesh just to see what it was like. I guess
He's using these examples, and it's understating the matter. Fulgrim, he didn't fall. He got cannonballed into it.
the way I put it is that the overarching reasons and the general plot of how he fell to chaos is great, but the specifics are pretty garbage. Anyways, Fulgrim tries to get his best bud Ferris in on the whole betraying everything you know and love thing, but Ferris didn't pick up the pork sword, so he wasn't having it.
The concept that Fulgrim thought he could turn Ferris is one of the funniest damn things I've ever heard. Because Ferris had more of an emperor-bothering stick up his ass than Rogel Dorn did.
They fight, Fulgrim runs away like a bitch, and now there's no turning back. Istvan 3 happens, all the loyalist Emperor's children are now dead, except for one who we'll get to later, and then some moral remembrancer who was just hanging out with them puts on a musical performance. It was so good that some demonettes show up, start murdering people, and the Emperor's children in the audience stand up and try to keep the music going, because at this point, sanity has left the building and isn't coming back. They discover that those tainted by Slaanesh, which is probably all of them by this point, can turn the music into sonic weaponry. It can naturally be used as a weapon, but it can also invoke all sorts of feelings in people and probably make their wiggly bits feel real good. With this, we now have Noise Marines, and the Emperor's children as a whole are fully committed to the Slaaneshi bit. Fulgrim is still just barely holding on to himself, but only just. Now time for Istvan 5, and a whole bunch of Salamanders, Raven Guard, and of course Iron Hands to get butchered. Iron Hands especially, because Ferris saw Fulgrim trying to recruit him as a sign that there was some sort of weakness in him Fulgrim was trying to take advantage of. Once again, that wasn't what was happening, Fulgrim just wanted his best bud by his side, but Ferris Manus, to repeat a point, didn't quite see it that way. So they fight directly on the Battle of Istvan 5, and to avoid this video becoming nothing but flowery language for the next minute straight, I'll just cut to the chase. Much like Fulgrim did when he cut Ferris's head off. As he did this, he had a moment of clarity. Out of every traitor Primarch, Fulgrim was one of the only ones to regret what he was doing. He saw all the treachery he had to do to get to this point, all the little and big things the sword convinced him to do, and absolutely hated himself for it. He just wanted everything to end. He just wanted to rest. It was at this point the sword stopped pretending to be anything but, surprise, surprise, a keeper of secrets.
Yay!
And offered Fulgrim a chance to just get that rest and take his mind off things. Fulgrim accepted and was imprisoned in his own mind, which is also a painting on a wall somewhere, while the keeper of secrets takes over his body like a full-body fleshlight. For quite a bit of time during the Horus Heresy, Fulgrim wasn't actually Fulgrim, just a keeper of secrets. Funnily enough, Lorgar, of all people, took objection to this, saying that
this is why I hate. This is one of the thousands of reasons why I hate Lorgar.
this wasn't like his gal Vorback. This wasn't two souls in one body. This was just a soul that had been completely annihilated, and the body was just a puppet. He nearly caved Fulgrim's possessed body in before Horus stopped him, which probably would have been the best situation possible, all things considered. Lucius also had a faint idea that something wasn't quite right, and eventually found the painting Fulgrim's soul was trapped in, which for the record was made out of bodily fluids. I'll let you think on which ones exactly that could be.
Yeah.
Lucius and some other Emperor's children captured the demon-possessed body of their Primarch to free his soul, and then some JoJo tier Justice Plan BS happens, and apparently Fulgrim wasn't actually possessed for at least a decent chunk of time. He managed to repossess his own body and actually put the Keeper of Secrets in the painting, so what they thought was Fulgrim was actually a Keeper of Secrets. It hurts my head to think about, and I don't really care to go to detail, because at least personally, it reads like the narrative going in circles for a bit, so all you need to know is that Fulgrim is presumably no longer being meat puppeted. Now,
it was the dumbest, just the absolute dumbest way they could have handled the Fulgrim storyline. Because when I reached the end of Fulgrim, the actual book called Fulgrim, I got kind of psyched, and then I was impressively disappointed.
fully committed to the Slaaneshi bit himself, he was now inviting his sons to partake in a journey with him. A journey to feel all the best things the universe had to offer, and more.
Yay.
With newfound horrible motivation, he's off to team up with the Iron Warriors. What fun! Worst Primarch is barging his way back into the storyline. Perturabo actually respected Fulgrim's perfectionism, since he too was a perfectionist, even if the way he went about it wasn't the same. So as a show of good faith, and because he's just anal about it, he had all his legionnaires lined up in nice and proper formation, waiting for Fulgrim and his kids to show up. Then the Emperor's children landed and stumbled out of their dropships like someone turned the entirety of the scummiest college frat house into super soldiers. Perturabo was curious what happened to the legion of honorable warriors he once knew, and actually a little bit perturbed by the change, but by this point he's got the allies he's got, so he goes along with it. Fulgrim convinces Perturabo that they really gotta go to this Eldar crone world to find a weapon called the Angel Exterminatus, because why not? It's not like the traitors couldn't be helped by more super weapons. He even gives Perturabo a completely innocuous little present, just to be a nice guy. So they go to the gaping asshole of reality that is the Eye of Terror and land on the crone world. It's at this point that the Eldar decide that now is a great time to remind these silly primitives that there's a damn good reason why they ruled the galaxy for 65 million years straight. Eldar simping in a Slaanesh video, it's more likely than you think. The moment Fulgrim and Perturabo got moving, the entire planet told them to go directly to hell and gave them directions at gunpoint. Completely intangible ghost warriors began cutting through the Astartes and numbering in the thousands, leaving no wounds behind but making corpses nonetheless. Crystal walls turned to what I can only think of as Super Wraith Guard and start pounding them into mush, and apparently they all knew how to throw Dragon Ball Z ki blasts. Turns out this crone world was lucky to have a whole lot of spiritual protection, and the dead Eldar on it were not happy to see an invading army, partly made up of followers of the goddess that killed them. Perturabo wasn't having fun, safe to say, but Fulgrim didn't really care either way. Deeper into the planet he went, with Perturabo eventually following after he realized Fulgrim had just dipped out on him. Fulgrim reveals the Angel Exterminatus isn't real yet, but will be soon, and also that it's him. Perturabo says that's arrogant even for him and goes to cave his head in, and then Fulgrim speaks in Cthulhu language, and suddenly that cool present he gave him starts killing Perturabo. It was like if Android 19 was a piece of jewelry, and was slowly but steadily draining him of power so Fulgrim could use his brother's life force to ascend into a demon prince. Suddenly some Iron Hands and Raven Guard showed up to try and stop things, shot the fancy energy-absorbing thing, and now the slowly recovering Perturabo walked towards his brother who was in the process of ascending to demonhood proper. And perhaps the only Perturabo moment I like, he actually felt some level of sadness. He knew Fulgrim as one of the noblest of all his brothers, and now he was basically gone. It's actually quite a sad moment, and one of the only times he felt any sort of emotional attachment to one of his brothers. Figuring that there was nothing left to lose at this point, he caved Fulgrim's body inwards with his hammer, which, rather unfortunately, was the final thing needed for Fulgrim to ascend to demon princehood. Perturabo gets even sadder because his brother's dead, and yet at the same time this abominable thing in front of him is his brother, and now Fulgrim has completed his character arc of becoming the absolute worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Fulgrim's ascension also caused the Crone world to just kind of destroy itself, so that's nicely wrapped up too. This
PancreasNoWork doesn't like Perturabo. I think Perturabo is one of the best Primarchs. He thinks he's the worst. The worst Primarch is Lorgar. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
was something that let the Eldar be a menacing threat, so GW clearly couldn't let that one keep going. And to be honest with you, I don't think anything really important involving Fulgrim happens from this point forward during the heresy. He was naturally on Terra with the rest of the traders during the final siege, and him and his children had a merry time assaulting and pillaging the planet's population. He knocked Sigismund around a bit, then Sigismund and Rogaldorn beat the shit out of him in return, and then he got baby mad again and left. His final act in real space for a couple thousand years was to put Grandpa Smurf in a 10,000-year coma, and then he disappeared to his pleasure planet in the warp. I've read online that he would supposedly try and recreate his childhood on Chemos to no ultimate success, with himself taking the role of different people within it each time, but that being said, I couldn't find a source for that one. If you think it's cool, feel free to take it as canon. It seems like the sort of thing the sick bastard would do.
Yep.
If not, well, like I said, I couldn't find a source for it, so feel free to just ignore it. I just think it's a neat idea for Fulgrim of what he's spending his time doing now that he's a demon prince. Some little vestige of him that's still trying to reclaim what he once had and not realizing he never can again. He would also...
The sheer fact of the matter is, Fulgrim is... he's just a wreck. He is like behind the music. Like if you will excuse a boomer reference, they used to do this thing on this channel called VH1 called Behind the Music, and it would show all these bands descent into drugs and madness. And he is the behind the music for the Primarchs.
Also have Fabius Bile try and clone his brother Ferris, and would get increasingly angry when every Ferris clone refused to turn against the Emperor and join Chaos. Of course, the idea that it just couldn't be done never entered his mind, and instead he would just keep yelling at Fabius Bile to do a better job next time. Aside from that, he was just kinda chilling on the pleasure world. Completely unfindable, unless you're Abaddon, who somehow managed to find and talk to him. Although in all likelihood, probably not that well hidden. The other Emperor's children are just too damned high to go and find their Primarch. As for why no one else but Abaddon could find him, why would anyone else want to find him? Several thousand years in the future, and Fulgrim has steadfastly committed to the role of being an unbelievably hedonistic prick. One day, he found himself doing whatever he does in the warp when a signal was found pinging into the void from none other than Istvan III itself.
It's time for the best story of the whole damn setting.
All it said was the Ancient awaits, and Fulgrim figured, I'll go check that out. Not like he's got anything better to do with his time, he's a Slaanesh demon. Whatever he wants to do is the best thing he has to do with his time. Turns out one of his old dreadnoughts that chose to die as a loyalist on the planet wasn't dead. Rylor the Ancient of Rights, baby. Big R was luring Fulgrim to the planet because he found himself a special surprise, and kept himself alive through sheer hatred for thousands of years just to give it to Fulgrim. The surprise was a virus bomb, and he was going to blow Fulgrim up with it. And he did. Just no strings attached, he did. Sure, some Thousand Sons also investigating tried to stop him at first, but then they decided that Rylor was actually the coolest guy ever and Fulgrim sucked, so they let him blow the thing up and turn the planet into hell one more time. Of note is that while Fulgrim naturally reformed, being a demon Primarch and all, this was explicitly a huge blow to his pride. Never had he been denied what he wanted before up until this point, not even on the siege of Terra, because in all honesty, he was just there to have a good time. In his mind, the Ferris Manus cloning thing could always be repeated until he got it right, so that was more of an ongoing project than a failure. But this time, Fulgrim wanted Rylor corrupted like the rest of his kids, and he couldn't have it. And as a demon Primarch, a being made up of the warp which itself responds to the emotions and happenings of real space, that can genuinely hurt him. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Rylor and those Thousand Sons did more damage to Fulgrim than anyone else since the days of the heresy. And now we come to modern 40k.
Rylor did extensive emotional damage to that stupid bastard.
Guilliman's back, and Fulgrim took that about as well as you'd expect him to. For a second time now, he's been denied what he wanted, and by God, is it time for the third and biggest fit of baby rage to begin. He tried to corrupt Guilliman to chaos, which didn't work because it's Guilliman and never works, and when he failed once again, he taunted Guilliman by saying he will never again feel satisfaction. Otherwise, Fulgrim would be there, waiting to drag his brother into Slaaneash's warm, moist embrace. Gilliman's response was to keep going, ruling the Imperium, and probably think about how much he misses his mom and dad. And beyond that, he's recently been cited a few more times. He assaulted a mining world with the Emperor's children, and this is for some reason considered a noteworthy occurrence. Phoenix Rising has a dude with 3 hands, a whip arm, and a snake-like body attacking Imperial Guard and Eldar alike. No guesses as to who that is. And some Emperor's children say that the Illuminator is coming when they topple a planet in faith and fury. Neat. And that, my children, is the basics of the Primarch of the Emperor's children, Fulgrim. Once a noble and altruistic fellow with enough negative traits to make him an actual compelling character, now a literally and figuratively horny snake monster. Where once he wanted to lift humanity out of the dirt and into the ideals he thought it could fit, now he wants nothing more than to chase the next high on the road to twisted perfection. Now normally at this point, I would do a mini do or don't to wrap the video up. But here's the thing, I don't care about the Horus Heresy tabletop game. I don't care for most of the models in it. I do not care about Fulgrim or any other Primarch's ability to commit fratricide compared to one another, and he doesn't have a 40k model with rules yet. So how about this? The moment Demon Fulgrim is released and playable, I will make Do or Don't Emperor's Children as the first of my 40k Chaos Do or Don'ts.
There you
if
go.
they shaft his kids and they still don't have their own proper subfaction by then, I'll make Do or Don't Fulgrim exclusively. That's the deal I'm making with all of you right here, right now. Also, no, I'm not talking about Clone Grim. Feel free to debate him in the comments, though. I can't stop you. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful channel members. You are the Laer blade to my Fulgrim, driving me down this dark path and convincing me to keep doing what I'm doing. So let me just get something straight. Fulgrim is a sword-fighting expert who wears ability-enhancing power armor, and as a result of being a Slaanesh demon, craves the perfect experience in all things.
Right.
Naturally, this includes seeking out the perfect fight. He's incredibly cocky and loves to taunt those who he faces, such as when he taunted Gilliman when he returned in 40k, and you can clearly see he's got one hell of a smug smirk on his face here.
Right.
And Demon Primarch form aside, he's quite handsome. Where have I seen this before?
Okay. I'll go with it. Cat, go on. Go, before you turn this computer off. What, you decide where you're going to be? Warpugs. Everybody has a Primarch that they think is the worst tool bag out of the tool bags. Come here then. Fine. You want to be in the camera? Fine. We'll be in here. We'll be right here. Okay? Fine. There you go. You happy? There. Okay. You happy now? You see yourself? Okay. So everyone has a trader Primarch that they think is the biggest tool bag out of a list of tool bags. For me, the biggest tool bag is, of course, Lorgar. Because, of course, he is. Now, the second biggest tool bag, of course, goes to Fulgrim. Third being Mortarion. Now, the reason being is because his entire story of his fall, everything else like that, like Pancreas said, was stupid. Absolutely stupid. Okay? Pick up the most evil-looking sword in the galaxy. Put it on yourself. Start hearing voices. Go meet the expert on Slaanesh in the galaxy, in the universe, in Eldrad. Eldrad doesn't notice a 6-foot sword that is possessed by Keeper of Secrets. Nobody can excuse that for me. No one. And especially not the way that Eldrad made his selection on who he wanted to talk to. Horus is betraying the Emperor. Who should I talk to? Let's talk to the guy who isn't burning Maiden Worlds, because obviously he's more intelligent. After he finishes dissing them for literally everything possible. And his poor judgment is the reason that Eldrad no longer trusted humanity, because he decided to pick the one that was basically worshipping a snake. That would eventually become a snake demon. Warpugs. I got a laundry list of reasons I have a problem with Fulgrim. Laundry list. But Perturabo, best Primarch out of the traders. Hands down. Pancreas cannot convince me otherwise. I'll catch you guys next time. Make sure you check the links in the description down below for all PancreasNoWork's links and my own, including for the merch store and the Patreon. I'll catch you guys next time.